Distracted driving is dangerous, but some people just can't seem to help themselves. There's the steering wheel propper, the sneak-a-peeker, the fast scroller, the nightlighter. And it's not long until they become the fender benderer, the got-a-ticketer, the veering off the road, the driver who kills someone. Enough with the phones already. Just put them down.
Welcome to the 25 to 26 Standard Plans Update Training. I am pleased to introduce our first presenter for today, Rick Jenkins, State Standard Plans Engineer. Please join me in welcoming Rick as he takes us through the updates.
Good morning and welcome. My name's Rick Jenkins. I'm the State Standard Plans Engineer. I'm excited to bring to you the annual presentation of the Standard Plans Update Training. Our new edition of the Standard Plans is the fiscal year 2025-2026 Standard Plans for Roadway and Bridge Construction. Today we will go over some of the changes to the Standard Plans and discuss why those changes were made. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat and our team will try and respond during the presentation. If we do not get your questions before the training has ended, we will put together the remaining questions and comments and either respond via email or the entire group if we feel it could benefit others to see that information. If you have any questions that you do not enter into the chat or you do not want to enter into the chat, feel free to email us directly. Today, I'm pleased to introduce our panelists for the webinar. First, I will do a quick introduction and go over some of the Standard Plans website. Shay Gibbs will cover some of the updates that we made to the Standard Plans for roadway construction. Richard Stepp will go through some changes that he made to the barriers, the guardrails, the utility and lighting indexes. And finally, Joshua Turley will cover a few updates to the Standard Plans for bridge construction. So here's a screenshot of our Standard Plans website. This is the page that I personally use the most as it has access to our standards, our trainings, our criteria, statuses of changes, contact information, etc. First, I'd like to highlight the Standard Plans link. This link is for the current Standard Plans, which is the 2025-2026 version of the Standard Plans. This link gets updated every year and takes you directly to whatever the current version is. So when you select that link, you'll go to the current Standard Plans. You can see that we have the Standard Plans number and the titles listed here. We would also list any interim revisions or erratas in this column. Currently, we don't have any interim revisions or erratas for this edition, but if there were any, they would be listed here. The Standard Plans instructions accompany the Standard Plans indexes and tell you information on the design criteria, pavement, etc. We would also have the design tools, if there are any, listed here. You can see that there may be a design tool spreadsheet, or there may be a 3D exhibit. It would be in this column for whatever index you're looking for. Next, I want to highlight the revision history log. This is important because it's a complete list of the changes to the indexes for the year. This update that we're giving you today does not cover every single change, but the revision log does, and it goes index by index, sheet by sheet. So it's a great resource to go check and see what changes have been made. Okay, so this was kind of big news for especially us here in our group. For years, we've been talking about updating the Standard Plans cover page. This is the first year in at least 3 or 4 years that we've actually done anything to the cover page other than change the version. And you can see that we added a little more color. It's the same information. It's just a new look, more aesthetically pleasing. Okay, back here on our standard plans website. Next, I want to show you the list of the previous editions of the standard plans. All of the versions of the standard plans can be found here. Back 2018-19 was our first edition of the standard plans. We also have the link to the CAD files for those standard plans here. You can use this link to see all the interim changes to the standard plans. We don't do a lot of interim changes. Interims require a bulletin, and mostly we'll try to update the standard plans within errata that I discussed before. But if there are any interims, they're listed on this website. We also have the link to the bulletin that releases the standard plans for that fiscal year, and then the effective date of those standard plans. Next, I want to look at the track the status of revisions page. This page is great to look at during our review process. We go through 3 reviews: the internal review process, which goes just to people inside FDOT, the industry review process, which goes to still FDOT, but we send it out as a contact mailer. So if you've signed up for contact mailer, you will get that review and get a chance to comment on any changes to the standard plans. And then finally, it goes to FHWA for final approval. Here, back on our standard plans page, we have a training link. The training link is great because it has training, even our other offices, including the FDM, et cetera. What I want to focus on right now is the standard plans link. This is where this training will be placed. We should have it up by the end of the year, maybe early January, but this is where we place the standard plans update every year. You can see that from 2017-18 on, they're all listed here. This is last year, so this is what it'll look like again this year. We'll have a PDF, we'll have a YouTube link, and then it'll list the presenters and have that contact information if you need to ask any questions. Lastly, I wanted to show you our staff directory. This staff directory will actually take you to the entire RDO staff, but what I want to focus on right now is our group in the standard plans. I am the administrator of the standard plans group. We currently have a vacant position, the standard plans publication manager, which I hope to be able to announce very soon. Richard Stepp is the other PE in our group. He focuses on lighting, fencing, roadside barriers, guardrails. Ryan Gray is our newest employee in the standard plans group. He's a specialist and he'll help out with a lot of different items, but his main focus will be on striping. So if you have any striping questions, feel free to contact him. Shay Gibbs is kind of our do-it-all specialist. She does a lot for our group. She does help me a lot with the delineators, etc. She does help out with a lot of different items, including some CAD items. Darren Martin is responsible. He is our CAD manager for SAY, and he's also the website manager. So he's created all this website, all the new updates to the website. He's responsible for that, and he's responsible for most of the CAD work that you'll see in the standard plans. Shay also is really our specialist for the apps. So if you submit a change to the standard plans, that goes through the app that Shay created. And that's all I'm going to really talk about today. I'm excited for the upcoming presentations. I hope it's a lot of good information that you can use. And once again, if you need to ask any questions, feel free to call or email me. And next, I believe Shay is going to present on some of our standard plans for roadway construction.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shay Gibbs, and I am a standard plan specialist in the roadway design office. I'm going to start off our updates to our fiscal year 2025-26 standard plans. In December of 2023, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, also known as the MUTCD, updated their book to the 11th edition. Most of the updates I will be covering are to make our indexes consistent and compliant with this 11th edition. Here is a list of the following topics I will be covering. We have Index 102.600, 102.615, 102.661, 700.102, 700.120, 700.010, and 711.001. Our first index is Index 102.600, General Information for Traffic Control Through Work Zones. On this sheet, we updated sign W161P to match the graphic from the MUTCD. So on the old sheet, we have the Share the Road sign, and on the new one, it's just the In-Road sign. The next one is Index 102.615, Multi-Lane Roadway Intersection Work. On this one, we added a new sign option, W9-3, under the center lane closed ahead sign. We also renumbered the older sign to an MOT number and gave you the option to use both. Here in our new book, you can see both options. The next one is Index 102.661, Bicycle Facility Closures. On this one, we updated multiple sign names to match the MUTCD. So we changed MOT 2024-21 and MOT 25-21 to R9-12. We also updated MOT 2021 and MOT 22-21 to W20-2A and W20-5B. And here you can see those new sign names on our new sheet. On sheet 2 of that index, you can also see that we updated the sign names to match the MUTCD. We also updated the sign graphics on W16-1P to take away the Share the Road sign and change it to the In-Road sign like we showed on our previous index. And we also updated the Bikes Merge sign to have the sign with the picture of the bike versus the word. You can also see that we updated the notes to match these changes. And here's the new sheet where you can see the new sign graphic and new sign names. Up next is Index 700.102, Special Sign Details. On sheet 6, we added this FTP 4525 sign. It's a Florida law buckle up sign that you would see at truck stops. We also updated the sign name of the one before that to FTP 44A-25. And then we moved FTP 51-06 to sheet 7 to make room for the new sign. Here is the new sheet 6 with that new sign added in. On sheet 8, we updated FTP 68A-06 and FTP 68B-06 to match the symbology, spacing, and reference on the MUTCD. We also updated the dimensions to FTP 72-06 to a 6-foot 6-inch sign in compliance with the MUTCD. These specific changes were done in coordination with the Traffic Engineering Research Lab. And here you can see the updated sheet with those new signs and a few signs shifted over because of that sign we added earlier. On sheet 9, we updated the dimensions of FTP 74-06, FTP 75-06, and FTP 76-06 to be that 6-foot 6-inch dimension as we did on the previous sheet. And here is sheet 9 with those new dimensions. On sheet 10, we added this FTP 100-25 yellow Florida law sign. And then we moved all of the MOT signs from this page to its own sheet to make it more clear through our standard plans. You can see that here. On sheet 12, we deleted multiple signs. The 11th edition of the MUTCD now includes work zone bike warning signs, which means some MOT signs shown in this index can be deleted. Additionally, the 11th edition of the MUTCD includes temporary traffic control typical applications for work in the vicinity of bicycle lanes and shared use paths, which specify what warning signs need to be used and where they should be placed. Consequently, the bike lane closed ahead plaques, MOT 24-21 and MOT 25-21, will no longer be used. We also added in the MOT 2725 center lane closed ahead sign. And here is sheet 12 with those deleted signs and our new added sign. The next one is index 700-120 enhanced highway signing assemblies. We deleted sheet 7 per the 11th edition MUTCD section 2A-12. We also deleted sheet 8 for that same reason. On sheet 10, we added LEDs in the middle of each sign edge for a total of 8 LEDs in this wrong way sign. You can see that update here with all 8 LEDs. On sheet 13, we added LEDs in the middle of each sign edge on the Do Not Stop on Track sign for a total of 8 LEDs. And there's the update to that detail as well. And finally, we have sheet 14 where we added LEDs in the middle of each sign edge on the stop sign for a total of 16 LEDs. And you can see that here. Next, we have index 700-010 single column ground signs. On this index, we updated the flip sign to allow for multiple sign panels, removed the diamond sign panel, updated note 1 to say install sign with the ESU sign panel in the undeployed up position. We added note 5, which says multi-sign panel assembly only. Use one of the following approved sign messages. Actual sign may need to be scaled. FTP 43-06, FTP 47-06, and FTP 66-21. We also added ESU to the sheet title. The changes to this index are coming from the head of Central Office Traffic Operations Office based on a request from the District Traffic Operations Engineers to allow for multiple sign panels on the ESU flip sign. We updated the standard plan to allow for 2 sign panels, and this was approved through the Traffic Operations Office. We also removed the diamond sign panel as this is not used for permanent ESU signs. And here is that new index with those updates. The last index I'm going to cover today is index 711-001 pavement markings. On this sheet, we updated all references of buffered express lane to managed. So you can see where it says buffered has all been moved to say managed express lane. We also updated the express lane markers to be tubular markers and deleted some outer lines on the detail to match the detail of the whole picture. This was done in coordination between FHWA and the FDOT Traffic Operations Office, which resulted in changes to the FDM and TEM to make them all coincide with the MUTCD. And you can see that here, where they now all say managed lane instead of buffered express lane. Thank you guys so much. Up next, we have Richard Stepp with more updates to our standard plans.
Good morning. Thank you, Shay, and thank you to everyone for joining us from around the state. I'm Richard Stepp, Standard Plans Engineer with FDOT Central Office in Tallahassee. For the fiscal year 2025-26 Standard Plans update cycle, I was primarily responsible for the following: temporary barriers, concrete barrier at toll sites, guardrail connections for existing bridges, fiber optic splice vault, standard aluminum lighting, and the utility conflict light pole. So first up is the Index 102 series, temporary barriers for MOT or maintenance of traffic. We've made some addition to the standard plans instructions. This addresses the single slope connections and some constrained conditions. So in the standard plans instructions for the 102 series, we've updated Part A. And so as you may know, a few years ago, the department shifted away from F-shaped barriers to single slope barriers. And now it's getting to be the case where there's more and more single slope barriers found out there in the existing condition. So next year, we have logged to update standard plans, the 102 series, to show the single slope barriers as something that the type K barriers can connect to. And that would be very similar to the F shape or the vertical shape. And that's basically shown on the left here. These details are copied directly from the current 102 series. And so in the meantime, before the new single slope barriers are added as an option for connecting to, we went ahead and added a note to the SPI that explains that these current existing details that are shown in the standard plans can also be used for single slope. And so basically it says that the single slope shapes may also be connected to the temporary type K barriers. And so in the plans, you just reference the Thri-beam guardrail positioning detail on sheet 10. That's shown here at the bottom of the slide. That does not mention any specific barrier shape, and so it is compatible with any barrier shape. And then also you just want to ensure that the installation note 3 is followed for connecting to the trailing ends of the single slope barriers and traffic railings. And so basically that note 3 is on sheet 1, and it explains that you fill the taper toes with the concrete as is shown up here, highlighted in yellow. And so for the traffic moving from left to right, that's just to prevent any snagging on the toe of that temporary type K barrier. So you just go ahead and smooth that out. So again, you can show a connection to single slope in your plans currently, and that's fine so long as you just reference this Thri-beam guardrail positioning detail down here. And then next up, we're still in the standard plans instructions for the temporary concrete barrier. So that's the 102 series. And this time we're looking at part B for shielding hazards. And so in this case, we wanted to add some additional clarity on what's needed for the length of these barriers. Previously, it had just given some information on meeting the length of need, like you would design for a new permanent barrier. But for the case of temporary barriers, some additional considerations and leeway is given. And so we went ahead and defined that to better work with the standard plans index details. And so the first goal, as with any barrier, is to meet the full length of need requirements wherever possible, wherever there's no project constraints. If constrained conditions are present, then you follow the updated SPI guidance, which is shown at the left. So just so you all know, this drawing is from index 102-120 for the low profile barrier. For a driveway, shows work area behind it. So essentially, if you're to end the barrier and start the barrier again this way, that is acceptable, and so the notes cover that. So again, this new text reads, for constrained conditions that prevent meeting the full length of need, such as those required for median openings, side streets, or driveways, extend the barrier to the farthest extent possible while providing for the safe movement of traffic. And so we mentioned those side streets or driveways, which alludes to the index drawings down here that explain how to handle a driveway. And then another consideration for the taller barriers, when they're placed in the median, you'd consider those clear sight triangles per FDM 212.11. So we went ahead and mentioned that. And then following suit, we went ahead and clarified the minimum lengths of the barriers for constrained conditions and unconstrained conditions. And so the minimum length is 200 feet for temporary barrier in unconstrained conditions. And then if it happens to be a type K barrier that's less than 200 feet, then you're going to have to go ahead and anchor that. So that is a requirement we spell out in this paragraph. And then also for the type K barrier, you have to extend a minimum of 100 feet past the work zone or hazard. And again, that's for unconstrained conditions. If it's constrained, you can go less than that, but then you have to anchor it. And so now all these requirements and considerations are clearly spelled out in the language in this SPI Part B. Next up, we have Index 521001 for concrete barrier, where we've given a small constructability update, and we've added an elevation requirement for the curb and gutter barrier. Additionally, in the standard plans instructions, we've added some information for reduced shoulders. And so first up, here we are looking at sheet 20 in the standard plans index for curb and gutter barrier. And so the maximum elevation has been added for the finish grade or the sidewalk that's right here behind this barrier. The finish grade elevation, including sidewalks, is 7 inches max above the footing. As you can see right here, this little elevation has been added. And that's basically measured to the finish grade elevation touching the back of the barrier, and then it's measured down to the top of the footing. And so basically placing a maximum cap on this finish grade elevation ends up being a 31-inch minimum pedestrian railing height. And so that's similar to the guidance that's provided for guardrail when there's guardrail present, and that's in FDM 222. And so again, this barrier is crash-worthy from vehicles over here on the left-hand side, and then on the back side, on the right side, it's essentially doubling as a pedestrian railing. That's 31 inches minimum if you follow this dimension right here for 7 inches max. And then another small revision that was added throughout the entire standard plans index. So in all of the elevation views, not just curb and gutter, but for also shoulder barrier and median barrier, we went ahead and added the begin end barrier section where it would be measured and where it would correspond to the plans, basically at the connection point to the traffic railing. And so for all barrier types, all pad and measurement, we have begin end barrier station on the left side, begin end barrier station on the right side. And then so when you call those out, in your plan view, that's how it basically matches up and aligns to the standard plans. And so that's just a small revision to add this to the traffic railing connection throughout the whole standard. We're just trying to be consistent and more be helpful where the callouts in the standard plans match your project specific plans. And so that helps the contractor to find their way around. And so next up, still looking at index 521001 for concrete barrier. Now we're looking at the standard plans instructions for that. We call them the SPIs all the time. You hear SPI, that's what we mean. So now we're looking at part F for variable section width segments. And we're taking a look at those reduced shoulder widths and how to handle those. And so these drawings are taken from the standard plans index. These are both median barriers. So you can see at the left, the standard 38-inch height median barrier that's basically symmetrical. And that's also down here. But then for the cases where you have to go around a sign support or place the sign support directly on top of the barrier at the bottom, those barriers obviously have to get wider. So you have the variable section width barrier. So it's begin end variable section width here, begin end variable section width here. And then because these barriers are varying in section width, they're actually reducing the shoulder. And so you can see reduced shoulder highlighted in yellow. That's been called out in the standard plans for a good number of years. And once in a while, we would get questions in central office on how to handle when those shoulders do get reduced. And so now we went ahead and added some guidance to the standard plans instructions. So up at the right, new guidance has been provided to address these reduced shoulder widths. So it's the pretty basic common sense things. We're not giving a whole lot of leeway for this. It's essentially if you were just to reduce a shoulder width, we're just going to point out the things that you'd have to consider. And so now we just flat out say project specific evaluation is needed for these reduced shoulder widths. And so we remind you want to consider the emergency shoulder use, the ESU needs per FDM 211. For general shoulder use width, it might not be considered a big deal to every so often reduce the shoulder width because, at least the vehicle has some space to pull off the road in between these. But for emergency shoulder use, if you're looking for consistent traffic flow without interruptions, then reduced shoulder width could be an issue and it could block that traffic flow. So that should be considered. Consider the general usable shoulder width, like I said, just for general vehicles being able to pull off the road and having complete freedom to do that. You may just want a roadway that has no obstructions. And so we remind to consider the usable shoulder width. And then when reducing the shoulder width, we want the EORs to coordinate with the district design office, typically the project manager, to get feedback and agreement on that. And so generally this type of median barrier is installed for very high capacity roadways in our larger cities like Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, Miami. Most of these major limited access facilities already have concrete median barriers, so this is a fairly rare installation type. But when these things are installed with sign supports, we do want some evaluation taking place. And it is possible that if you do need to use these reduced shoulders for these overhead sign supports, that you will need more right-of-way if you need to keep full shoulder widths throughout a heavily traveled corridor. And so obviously for all of that, you're going to need to coordinate with the district. And so we do expect that reduced shoulders would happen rather infrequently. However, you can do it. It just needs a lot of agreement for those rare cases. So not really changing anything, just pointing out that if you do use these reduced shoulders, you generally would need a design exception per FDM 122 because reducing shoulders is a controlling element as defined in that chapter. And so again, this SPI isn't really providing much new information. It's just a reminder and letting you know that just because this says reduced shoulder width, it doesn't allow you to then skip over all of these evaluations that would normally be needed for reducing a shoulder. And so hopefully that would help to clear things up more quickly for the designers and save some time so they know that they need to be considering those things. And so again, that's in the SPI part F. All right, so moving along, next up we have index 521005 for concrete barrier at toll sites. And this is a new index that's considered a regular standard plans index and not developmental. So this has been out there as a developmental for a little while, and now we're moving it into the standard index 521005. And so it no longer needs a project-specific approval from central office. And so we just randomly clipped a plan view sheet to give you a feel for what it looks like. This one happens to be sheet 5, scheme 4, to show you the plan view. And so concrete barrier at toll sites was previously introduced with our fiscal year 2023-2024 standard plans update training, where I explained a good amount of detail. So if you're interested, please go back and look at that training. But just as a reminder, this is primarily used for the Florida's Turnpike Enterprise toll sites. We developed it with FTE engineers. This provides 10 layout schemes for various pull box and gantry support placement configurations. So we have cantilever gantries, span gantries, and then all types of pull box locations. And so there's 10 more sheets that look very similar to this one, where all of the pull boxes and supports are all moved around, all as requested for the Florida Turnpike Enterprise. And then the major need for this index came about when Turnpike designers were trying to create all these complex barrier shapes on a project-specific basis, and they weren't providing any real reinforcing details. And so here we went ahead and handled that in a standardized way. And an innovative piece of this index is that it uses glass fiber reinforced polymer reinforcing, also called GFRP throughout. So that's basically non-metallic, and the whole purpose is to avoid interference with toll site detection equipment, which has gotten very sensitive, detects the number of metal axles in each vehicle. And so not having this metal all over the barriers really helps. So these full reinforcing details are provided in this standard, as you can see. And then next, something that's truly all new that's been created for this cycle are the standard plans instructions that go along with that. And so now the designer has some more information to get them started. As we know, as a reminder, those standard plans instructions do give information for the designer on how to then implement those standard plans and have them coordinate with the project specific plans. And so these are essentially defined in the FDOT design manual and sort of serve as an extension for that information for designers that's actually index specific. And so specifically for concrete barrier at toll sites, these SPIs let the designer know that these standard plans work in coordination with the Florida Turnpike Enterprise's general tolling requirements. So right off the bat, it lets the designer know where to go look for additional information. So you can see that's also known as the GTR, highlighted in bold in the first paragraph of this SPI. It also lets the designer know that the engineer of record chooses the scheme number in the plans, draws the basic layouts to scale, and ensures all the alignment. So just the basic responsibilities of the EOR. And then scrolling down in that same document, the SPI explains the project-specific design information in Part B. And so it's definitely worth noting that toll sites are relatively advanced, lots of electronic equipment, lots of specialized structures. So there's a significant amount of project-specific design work that is required from the EOR. And to save the designer a lot of time, we just listed those things out in a pretty concise way. And so essentially what this is doing is coordinating with the general notes in Index 521-005. So if you were to read through those general notes in the index and recognize all the project-specific information that's needed, that would lead you to the conclusion of the things that you're seeing in this list. And so without getting too deep into the weeds, we're just going to let you know here today what topics are addressed. And then when you go and look at the SPI, it'll guide you to where to find more information about those things. And so going down our list, this SPI mentions project-specific needs for the minor grade separations and how to call those things out in the plans, typically labeled at the gutter line. Single-sided tapers, and so if you have a taper transition only on one side of the barrier, it then extends the length of that barrier. That can be controlled in the plan view, and so that's mentioned here. Project-specific gantries and supports, just like with the regular 521-001, that does require a structural EOR to design that foundation and design the reinforcing steel that goes through the barrier, because every project-specific gantry is different and has a different load, and a lot of times there's different space constraints. So that does require a structural EOR to be involved. The pull boxes and conduit is in number 4, and for that toll site technology, those things really are designed and required by the Florida Turnpike Enterprise. It's explained in their general tolling requirements, GTR, and then also for general pull box information, that's covered in the standard specifications, and there's pay items in there as well. Again, that advanced electronic equipment, the Florida Turnpike Enterprise experts, and the general tolling requirements explains the needs for those. And then last, the toll header curb, you basically call for that where it's required for flexible pavement, and that's explained in the index itself. And so again, for something as advanced as electronic revenue collection on Florida's Turnpike, you definitely want to be looking at the general tolling requirements and working with those Florida Turnpike Enterprise toll site experts. They got a really good team over there at the Florida Turnpike Enterprise. Okay, and now shifting gears to Guardrail, we're going to take a look at Index 536002, where we have guardrail connections for existing bridges. We've made a constructability update for the tolerance of the longitudinal placement of the connections. And then we have some SPI additions, which involve the responsibilities of the EOR. And so on sheets 26 and 27, where we have guardrail connections to general types of bridges with safety-shaped traffic railings that extend less than the full length of the approach slab. So that's the old way of doing it, but these are the general connections. And so basically the tolerance has been added for the distance between the end of the concrete barrier and the center of that guardrail splice. So as a result, we'll zoom in a little bit. Basically, you can see the end of the concrete here, and then that 7¼ inches measured to the center of that splice. You know it's the center of the splice based on that typical 6'3" measurement that goes from the center of the splice to the center of the splice on a panel. And so that tolerance is very helpful, particularly for an existing condition where you're basically through bolting a concrete barrier and attempting to avoid whatever existing steel is in there. And in general, just working with existing conditions and trying to avoid whatever surface irregularities are around with the posts. It does help to have that little bit of wiggle room for a tolerance. And so we did research nationally regarding crashworthiness and what some other states have done. And it's determined that 7¼ inches is reasonable, and that plus or minus 2 inches is also not expected to affect the safety performance. So we went ahead and added that to help out the inspectors and the contractors. And then next up in the same index number, we're now looking at the standard plans instructions, or the SPI. And so here are just showing some example drawings from the standard plans. The standard plans depict numerous cases of existing bridges and railing retrofits that could be used that are all defined in a lot of other standard plans index numbers. And so index 536002 was designed to coordinate with all those other standard plans indexes. And so this is a fairly complex topic that does involve some engineering design work. That's why we need those EORs out there statewide. Unfortunately, what had happened in some cases is that the EOR would have simply in their plans said follow 536002, despite the fact that there's numerous options. And this really isn't something that was ever intended to be left to the contractor to make all these decisions on standard plan selections on exactly what type of options they're supposed to be picking. And so now in the SPI and the design assumptions and limitations, it just further clarifies that the EOR must provide the project-specific traffic railing and connection scheme information in their plans. So that's project-specific information that needs to be provided so that the contractor knows exactly what to look at and they can begin their work without doing their own design work. And so, for example, the project-specific plans would obviously have to call out the type of railing that's being used. So it would just be, for example, railing index 521-405. And then for the guardrail connection, the EOR would call out index 536002, sheet 22, scheme 3. And so the contractor could look at what matches their case, and then they know how to handle that. So again, just like a typical guardrail design, if you're designing for an existing bridge, to look at 536002, and then you call out that scheme option and exactly which indexes correspond to each other so that the contractor knows what to look at. And with that, we're turning the page from our roadside safety items, and now we're going to look at index 635005 for the fiber optic splice fault. And so this was recently published as a developmental standard that needed central office approval, but now it's being moved to a regular index 635005 that no longer needs central office approval. So now it's just a normal standard plan. And for that reason, we'll give you a quick review. All right, and so again, this was previously introduced with the fiscal year 2024-25 standard plans update training as a developmental back then, but now just a regular index number. There's no more D in front of there. And so designers are free to use it as they see fit. So quick reminders, this is primarily used for the Florida Turnpike Enterprise medians to facilitate their fiber optic access points and connections. This was developed because in the past, each project-specific set of plans was ending up having to use shop drawings from multiple vendors to define everything here. And so we recognize that a lot of time can be saved, a lot of economy of scale could be captured by standardizing this item that tends to be repeated on lots of projects. And so the result is what you see in front of you. The Structure Design Office designed this for the H20 loading to accommodate maintenance equipment that would be typical out in a median. This uses the Type 3 manhole per Index 425001. And so again, it's that economy of scale and just using existing parts and pieces from our other standards. You can see that the Type 3 manhole is called out in a few locations and explained in the notes. Standard plans instructions to go along with this is all new for this update cycle. It explains the design assumptions that this is primarily used for FTE, Florida Turnpike Enterprise. It may be used in other districts at the district's discretion. Also, it was a request of industry that project-specific designs may still be used if they're signed and sealed by a Florida professional engineer. And again, it has to meet that AASHTO H20 loading. So that's explained in the text here. And then some brief plan content requirements are mentioned. So basically, you need to call out the vault and the plan view. It explains how to define the orientation. And then one last thing to coordinate with the notes in the index. The default lettering on top of the manhole top may be changed with the plan's call out. And so that's explained down here in the last paragraph. So basically just says the default lettering on the manhole cover top is TPK fiber optic. To change this wording, you can place project specific call out in the plans. And so an example is you just say next to the call out manhole custom wording and then F dot district 5 and put an arrow and point to that. And the index note will also clue in the contractor that custom wording may be possible. So they need to look for that. And so again, that concept is explained in this index 635005 note 2. So the vast majority of cases will be in the turnpike. If you happen to be using it for something else, you can change that lettering on top of the manhole. Just call it out in the plans. For our next standard, we'll go ahead and take a look at Index 715002 for standard aluminum lighting. And so here we did a CAD refresh throughout. We got some miscellaneous updates and some new ARM options. And so just mentioning something behind the scenes, this particular index has been around for decades. A lot of the drawings were completely not to scale, not using our current CAD practices and symbology, although for standard plans we do use pretty basic symbology because there's no quantities being done. But in general, we would like to have everything drawn to scale. We know that there's a lot of project-specific designs that take place, and our DGNs are available on the Standard Plans website, pretty easy to find. So when anybody starts to work with those CAD files and opens them up, and they're all drawn to scale perfectly, it makes things a lot easier. So I have to give credit to Shay Gibbs. She's done a tremendous job helping Darren Martin and Rick Jenkins organize these publications for the last couple of years and give us a new publication system internally. And in addition to that, she's been doing a lot of great CAD work. And so Shay went through all 9 sheets and upgraded everything to scale, essentially redrawing a lot of things. And so very much appreciated. So all these things are now drawn to scale for any designer that needs to go to those DGNs on our website and use them. So in addition to that, just making it look like our other standard plans, reorganized sheet 1 a little bit, added a table of contents to help find your way around. So just trying to help give all of our standards the same look and feel. As part of the CAD refresh, believe it or not, a couple designers asked about this. We were still showing the old high pressure sodium 715001. We showed the graphic for the LED luminaire. Now everything matches, all upgraded to look like modern technology now. So just essentially keeping up with the times. And then one of the content changes actually requested by a designer is for these median barrier mounted light poles to basically only have one arm or have a pole top mount available And so while it wouldn't really be practical to show every possible combination in these elevation views, we just handle those things in the notes, and then it shows up as an option in the pay item. And so we just handle those things in the text, and then the option shows up in the pay item. And so all we do is essentially say that the double arm is shown here in parentheses, but the single arm and top mount are similar. And when you say there's something similar, that just means it's permissible, it's available. So if you do need to use single arm just for one side, you can go ahead and do that now. And then last but not least, we'll take a look at one of our newer standards, 715003, for the utility conflict pole. And then here upon request, we've added a new spread footing option. So I'll just show you what that looks like. So just gonna quickly show you sheet 1 so you remember what a utility conflict pole looks like. Essentially has a really tall rise, a really long fixture arm. The purpose is to avoid those utilities like overhead power lines. And so this option has ended up being fairly popular. The small change made to this sheet based on our new option is that, again, the devil's in the details, so you could read these little notes that are in parentheses. So now it says the shaft foundation is shown, but the spread footing foundation is similar. And again, when we say something similar, that means it's permissible, it's available. So there is a spread footing foundation option now. So this is essentially just showing an elevation of an example to show most of the common features, but this foundation down here, a spread footing foundation, can be used instead. And so the spread footing foundation is now shown on sheet 404. This should look very familiar. It's almost identical to the spread footing foundation that's available in 715002 for the standard type of light pole. And so quickly we'll mention the benefits. It saves space for constrained conditions, typically used in urban areas where there's really no grassy area to mount a pole. It basically avoids underground utility conflicts because it's very shallow. It doubles as a sidewalk surface, so this is essentially mounted where there's a sidewalk on either side, and then pedestrians would just walk right by it, right on top of the spread footing foundation. And then for that reason, it's designed to meet the FDM 222 clearance needs for pedestrians. So that minimum lateral width of the sidewalk is met by default. And then last, there's a note to explain that the light pole does orient towards the roadway. That's how this is designed to function. So roadway's up here, the center of the upright is here, and then the arm is positioned projecting out towards the roadway, which is towards the top of this page. And so that's the end of my revision update content. For this audience, I'm really happy to make this training announcement. Basically, we've provided live a couple months ago FDOT roadside barrier design training, and now that video webinar is available online. And so that training generally I describe as beginner to intermediate level, but really all designers can probably get something out of it. But it covers FDM 215 for roadside safety, the usage needs of the barrier, the length of need of the barrier, just general requirements. It takes a look at the standard plans for guardrail, concrete barrier, and pier protection barrier, and even crash cushions and how all those things tie together. And so that training, when hosting it live statewide, there's about 600 attendees. So I was very happy with that turnout. It was a really good experience. We have little quiz questions embedded throughout, which are really a great review. I've been told that the quiz questions are challenging, but that's great because if you don't get it right, then you tend to remember it. So that video webinar that's now posted online still has those embedded quizzes just for you to take at your own pace. So you just hit pause, try to answer the question. It's a nice review. There is no quiz required to get the PDH credits. There's really nothing official about it. It's just kind of a fun game to keep you motivated and keep you moving forward. And then one other motivation is the 11.5 PDHs. We know that our professional engineer renewal cycle is coming soon. And so if you watch all of these sessions, you get 11.5 PDHs. I think they just electronically verify that you were watching the whole time. But again, there's really no quiz or testing requirement. And so to find it, you can just go to the Florida LTAP Center website, look at the top to recorded trainings, and then you'll see fairly recently our FDOT roadside safety barrier design training. Alternatively, the exact web address is located right here. And then also very shortly, we're going to post that to our own FDOT training website, pretty much in the same location that you'll find this standard plans update training. So there's multiple ways to navigate to it, and it's sincerely appreciated. So if you didn't get a chance to catch it when we hosted it live, watching the recorded webinar is almost as good, and you can send me questions you have from it anytime you need. So speaking of, my contact information is here. Again, my name is Richard Stepp with FDOT Central Office in Tallahassee. Here's my email address. And then after this, I'm going to attempt to answer any live questions I can during this current training in the chat box. So any questions you have, feel free to type away. It's appreciated. All right, and so this concludes my portion for fiscal year 25-26 updates. Next up, ready to go, we have Josh Turley from our Structures Design Office, going to give you some updates on revisions to our structural standard plans. And so with that, thanks again for your time and attention. Josh Turley, take it away.
Hi, welcome to the 2025-26 Structure Standard Plans Update Training. My name is Joshua Turley, and I'm the Structure Standard Plans Engineer here in the Structures Design Office. I'll be highlighting a couple of notable changes to the Structure Standard Plans for the new Standard Plans book. Many of the changes for this cycle were corrections or clarifications, so I won't go over them here, but I invite you to review them on the Standard Plans website. Today, I want to bring to your attention these 5 changes, which we will go through next. The first change is to Standard Index 460-470, Traffic Railing Thri-Beam Retrofit. We have added an option to use screw anchors for the posts. The approved anchors should be found on the APL. Here we have adjusted the notes to show the inclusions of the screw anchors. We have updated the details as well to show the addition of the screw anchor option. As an example, here in sheet 3, we have updated section BB to show the addition of that screw anchor. What you're seeing on this sheet in the top left are the posts, which the Thri-Beam pictured over to the right is attached to. The post must be anchored to the ground, and the way we have depicted it in the standard is that we've modified the details so that they show the original adhesive anchor construction, but with dashed lines and additional annotations to indicate how you can modify the construction to use the screw anchors. As a little aside, and bear with me here, some of you might ask, why are we adding screw anchors in the first place? This is a great question and one I have a lot of personal experience with. Early in my career, I spent a great deal of time in the field doing structural inspections. I've inspected hundreds, if not thousands, of post-installed anchor installations. 95 out of 100 were installed incorrectly. I'm exaggerating, and that's a number I just made up, but it was something like that. If you've ever been involved with adhesive anchor installation, you know that there's a specific process you must adhere to. No pun intended. First, you drill the hole, and then you have to blow the hole out with compressed air at a specific minimum pressure for a minimum time. I think it's something like 80 psi for 5 seconds. Don't quote me. Then you have to take a wire brush and brush the hole a number of times, let's say 20 times. Then you have to blow it out again with that same specific compressed air and time. In many cases, the hole must be dry, clean, and free of any oil or debris. And it seems like a fairly straightforward operation. It's almost always done wrong. I show up to job site A, holes are not drilled to the right depth. Job site B, they don't have an air compressor, just a small shop vac with a cut water bottle duct taped to the tip. Job site C doesn't have any wire brushes. Job site D ran out of mixing nozzles that go on the end of the adhesive gun. So they mixed the adhesive on a brick with a scrap of cardboard. Show up to job site Z and it's rained and the holes are full of water. I've literally grabbed bars that were supposedly properly installed and cured in concrete and pulled them out by hand as if I were Arthur pulling Excalibur from the stone. No, I'm not the king of all England, and no, those bars are not installed correctly. A careful look at the end of the bar, and you could see that the hardened epoxy was bonded to the concrete dust and sludge left in the hole. It was about as effective as duct tape on kitty litter. So you can see But the installation of adhesive anchors, while simple enough, can be fraught with issues. Now let's consider screw anchors, which can have the same capacity, same or similar. You drill the hole, and wet or dry, dusty or not, you screw the anchor in. If it screws in, well, success. So on the installation side, much more reliable. The only trouble I ever had with these is when I went to inspect an installation. I showed up on the job site and they had already been installed. So I thought, okay, well enough, checking the box size and the diameter. Then as happenstance occurred, I was walking, my boot kicked some odd bit of this or that laying partly buried in the sand. And glimpsing down, I see in a sheen of mechanically galvanized metal, what do I find? The end of the screw anchor that had been cut off. Yeah, it turns out the contractor didn't drill the holes deep enough, probably hit rebar or something, and instead of fixing the problem, cut the screw anchor short and then installed them. Missed some of the evidence though, so I guess no plan or system for that matter is foolproof. However, all taken together, I do like the screw anchors far more than the adhesive ones. All right, so just to be helpful here for those of you who've not ventured recently to the APL, which stands for the Approved Products List, you might fumble around in Google and find it, or you can go to this website, path.fdot.gov/specifications. So then you arrive at this APL application. And there are two ways to search here, which you can use depending on what suits you best. You can use a search bar for keywords, or you can search via the specification number. So if we go in here and search for screw anchors, you'll see the search results, 0. This means that as of right now, since we've made this new change, the manufacturers of the screw anchors have not come on board with fully approved APL applications. This being a new change, however, that's not surprising. We should expect some lag time for the manufacturers to apply and get posted to the APL. I just wanted to give you a heads up in advance so you don't go here thinking you did something wrong. The next change to discuss is to 471.30, Fender System Pre-Stressed Concrete Piles and FRP Wales. Here we have updated the Fender System energy capacity from 38 kip feet to 50 kip feet. This was based on new research completed by the University of Florida. Please contact me if you'd like a copy of the research. For 521.660 light pole pedestal bridge, we have made some adjustments to the light pole and anchor bolt information. We indicated that the maximum mounting height of the light pole is 40 feet, for which the standard was designed, but which was not clearly identified before. We removed the anchor bolt table because it added to this confusion by offering anchor bolt options for pole heights which were not designed for. Instead, we give the anchor bolt information directly in the note. In addition, we have labeled the nuts on the anchor bolt accurately to correspond with the specifications update to the anchor bolt nut tightening procedure. Here in 630.10 Conduit Details Embedded, we have added an elevation detail to show how to configure the barrier reinforcement to account for an embedded junction box. Some contractors were unsure if they were to cut the bars or add bars or both or neither. Here it is clearly showed that we do not eliminate bars, rather we shift the conflicting bars to either side of the junction box. In 715.002 Standard Aluminum Lighting, we revised the labeling for the nuts on the anchor bolts. This was done to correspond with an update in the specification regarding the anchor bolt tightening procedure. And that's it. Like I said, many of our changes this year were clarifications or corrections, which you can review in detail on the website. But I wanted to make special note of the ones discussed today. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach me via phone or email, and I'll be happy to take your call or correspond with you. Have a fantastic day and design well.
Thank you for joining our webinar today. We're excited to have had you with us and look forward to your participation in future webinars sponsored by the Office of Design. Watch out for more opportunities to engage with us. Also, visit our website for more information and upcoming events.